I am audio checking away.
Checkity check, check,
Woohoo.
check. Check, 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 check.
And check.
Giggity,
Mate
giggity, woo,
in
woo.
3. Audio checking away.
Checkity check, check,
Woohoo.
check. Check, 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 check.
And check.
Giggity,
Mate
giggity, woo,
in
woo.
3. Audio checking
That's
away.
all I need to hear. So there's far more than I actually needed to hear, but we're all right.
Alrighty. Well, I just went ahead and canceled out of Skype, seeing as how it's worthless.
Yeah, I'm glad to know it's not just you. I wonder if it's a particular hardware set or what. But neither Seth nor I can make outbound calls anymore, or we can't hear calls.
Microsoft. What the heck?
And it's the kind of thing Microsoft would do, because we're both using old operating systems. He's using Windows 7. I'm using Windows Vista.
Right.
And it's the kind of thing Microsoft would do. Well, it works fine on our Windows 10 machines.
Uh-huh.
Next.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Windows 7 is still supported, though. That's the thing.
Yeah, you would think it would be all right.
Right.
wouldn't it?
Supported, but not cared about.
Well, I mean, that's true.
They do security updates. All right.
Oh, well, they'll be on Windows 11 any day now.
No, they'll probably stay on Windows 10 and just keep updating it.
Oh, okay.
All right. You turn my fan off. Start sweating.
So like the OS X for Apple, 10, 10.1, 10.2, 10.2, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, 4, 10.3, 10.
And then they just dropped the X again and went back to Mac OS like it was 1991. I mean, I don't understand those guys.
Well, I think the new iPhone X is the last. From here on out, it's just going to be iPhone X. The 2017 iPhone X, the 2018 iPhone X, the 2019 iPhone X.
I saw this great thing on Facebook. It was Samsung saying, "Hey, Apple fans, welcome to 2014."
Yeah.
It was a feature comparison between their old Samsung and the current Apple.
Yeah, it's funny. We were having a conversation with somebody last night about that phone, and they said, should I get one? I'm like, well, I don't have an iPhone. I use Android. Oh, I have to have an iPhone. I'm, loyal Apple. And then she says to me, I like that idea of, the charging thing where you can just sit it down somewhere and it charges. I'm like, really? Do you have that rapid charging thing on your phone? No, what's that? I said, I can charge my phone to like 85% in 20 minutes. What? You can? Yeah. I'm like, you can sit your phone down on anything you want, but I guarantee you'll be leaving it for about 3 hours. It's like their priorities are so messed up. I don't get it, but that's why I'm in the minority, I guess.
On my device, that turbocharging works, but in order to keep the heat down, it slows your processor down to roughly that TRS-80 behind you. And literally,
great show fodder.
So, it's true.
It is.
I'm listening to an audiobook, getting ready for bed, brushing my teeth. This is my regular routine. I get in bed. I plug the thing in. It stops. 30 seconds later, it starts again. It's just like, oh, wait. Sorry, you plugged us in. We got to take a minute.
Wow.
Yeah. And so
the only thing I noticed with mine was I had to have like a special cable. I don't know why, but they wanted a special cable to make it work without overheating or something. That was it.
I use lots of generic cables. Some work better than others. Some just can't handle the current.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, we probably should have talked about that while we were recording. But since we didn't, let's start recording.
All righty.
Processing.
We're in
the money. We're in the money. All right. 35-10. 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. If they recovered, this would be one of the greatest fourth quarter comebacks ever in the history of the game. And even if I'm going to watch it, I'm not going to watch it while podcasting and looking at a 5-inch screen. So I should just turn this off now.
The distraction.
All right. Ready and making marker and go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the GeekRant, episode 303. Finally, we talk about FreeNAS. Recorded September 17th, 2017, and brought to you by Element OP Productions. ElementOP.com. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Drive Time Radio for Geeks. I am your host, Mark, the Wild Zoo Man. That's how they do it on Drive Time Radio, right? Sometimes known as the Sultan of the Soapbox Cockerel. And joining me, as always, are your two stalwart co-hosts, Seth, the Gooey Kid Anderson, and Miles, the Oxygenator Wakeham. Hello, gentlemen.
Hey, Mark, and welcome back, folks. We're not quite as desperate as last week.
Oh, wasn't that really bad last week? Apologies for everyone for our technical failures for last week. It happens. What do you do?
But, I think when it was all said and done, other than our whining about it, there was no real notice in the end product.
That's because we're true professionals.
We are about as far from professionals as you can get, because professionals get money. That's all I'm saying. I'm going to just drop the mic. This time last week I was talking about the overreaction here of my. I think I mentioned it right. The schools had let out 2 days, just in advance before a drop of rain had fallen. Irma was coming this way, and so the Cobb County School District let out Monday and Tuesday. And basically, if you know something about Atlanta, these names will mean something. If not, pick any city in the world. There's a south end. There's a north end. Hold on a second. I forgot to do my preemptive power cycle. So now I have to start over again. All right. So like any city in the world, there's a south end, there's a north end, and there's Midtown, right? So pick any big city. You can pretty much get that combination. And so what happened was, as the storm crossed 700 miles of Florida and then ravaged another 300 miles of South Georgia, once it hit Midtown Atlanta, it just gave up. I'm done. So if you were south of Midtown Atlanta, you had trees uprooted, power lines down. People were without power for 3 or 4 days. If you were in Midtown Atlanta, you had maybe some trees knocked down, maybe some power out for a couple of hours. If you were north of Midtown, uptown, and above, you got some rain. It was the oddest thing I'd ever seen watching the radar. It just got there and just dissipated, and spread across the rest of the country. So I don't know what Atlanta did, but it sucked the wind right out of Irma.
The hurricane killer.
But in spite of it all,
It's that heat island.
that's possible. But it went through a lot of heat islands before it got to that one.
Well, yeah, but by then it's all off the Gulf, and so it's not pulling the moist air as much. It's got to come over land. So then when it hits that heat island, that just kind of dissipates it out. So yay concrete, yay earth killing. We saved Atlanta.
But despite the fact that all we got here was some wind and some rain, I mean, it was really it was nothing that anybody who'd been through a Texas spring thunderstorm would even pay attention to. And yet we still managed to have a flooded kitchen. Not because of the storm, but because my garbage disposal picked that particular day to rust out. And we were home using the sink more than we typically would, and everything we dropped down the sink went right into the cabinet under the garbage disposal. And we didn't notice it because it went right down there and right into the subfloor under that. And I went downstairs to the basement and was like, why is there 2 gallons of water in the basement floor? So I mopped up the floor and I looked around. I couldn't figure out what. I thought maybe one of the kids had just spilled something. Didn't pay any attention to it. A few hours later, I went back down. Hey, there's more water there. So the next morning, we saw the real extent of the damage. All that water that hadn't fallen into the basement had sucked into the subfloor, and now my kitchen floor is bowing and warping and ruined. So I have a flood story the same weekend as Hurricane Irma, but I can't blame it on Hurricane Irma.
Sure you can.
There's people in Houston right now that are just like fuming listening to you talking about that when their roof is somewhere down the street. You know?
Yeah, all things considered, I'll take having to replace about 30 boards in my kitchen over anything else that weekend had to offer. But yeah, that's my story.
You need to buy an aqua dam and place it around the pipes.
Well, The interesting thing was then I couldn't get a plumber to come out because they were all either on emergency watch, as they should be, or they had battened down their own hatches. And so still, with only mild rain having come, I couldn't get a plumber to come out for a couple of more days. And then when the guy came out, he said, well, the problem here is at some point they put in this deep farmhouse sink, but they didn't change any of the plumbing. And so the garbage disposal actually sits about an inch below the drain line. And so it just sits there with water in it all the time. And this thing that should have lasted a decade or more can't be more than 5 years old. I said, great, what will it take to replace it? Well, you got two choices. You rip out the entire granite countertop, take the farmhouse sink out, put a regular sink back in, or you rip out the entire floor and wall and move all the pipes. And I said, or option B, I buy a new garbage disposal for $100 every 3 to 4 years. So that's what we're looking at right now.
So how many days were your kids out of school?
Just 2 days. Parts of the South were out longer because they had more significant storm damage and no power and stuff. But my kids were out 2 days. And by the end of that second day, man, were they bored.
Kids, I'm going to need you to write a research paper on the effects of flooding in Houston, Texas. I need sources.
So the Monday after we recorded here, I worked from home that day because they had closed the office building. The owners of the building in Midtown where I worked, actually we're a little north of Midtown, had closed the building preemptively again. Because like I said, once the governor declares a state of emergency, there are certain protocols in both healthcare and corporate thing that just kick in automatically. So I worked from home that day, and then we were all back in the office the second day, and it was really just kind of a weird thing. It was just why did we have a day off for no reason? But it wasn't off. We were working, except those of us who didn't have any power. So it was an odd mix of I can't get anything done because some of my teammates aren't here because they don't have power, and others are, and it was just weird. But again, compared to people who literally lost everything, I should shut up. But I'm sitting behind a microphone. I kind of can't.
We need to whine. That's what we do. Our culture and civilization is falling all around us. What else do we have to do but whine?
A friend of mine who is from the Houston area, but lives now in the Dallas area and back in Texas now, had this brilliant brainstorm of an idea. And as far as I can tell, it's her idea. I don't want to mention her name because I haven't asked her permission. But this idea should go viral. It deserves to go viral. She is collecting tuxedos and prom dresses for kids in Houston who, that want to get some part of their life back. If they had a dress, it was ruined. If they didn't have a dress, parents aren't going to have the money now because they're essentially rebuilding their entire lives. And what a simple thing you can do if you bought that prom dress, or your daughter brought that prom dress and has worn it once and has been in the closet ever since, ship that thing down to Houston. Now, don't just send a bunch of dresses and tuxedos, but touch base with local schools down there. And this would be an amazing gift for these kids who have gone through so much to be able to give them a normal prom. So I thought that was a great idea that I'd mentioned on the show.
Yeah, I saw that somewhere online. I don't remember where it was.
Well, it's a mutual friend. That's why you saw that.
Cool.
And my church is sending mud out buckets. It's a bucket with rubber gloves and chalk lines and flashlights and all the stuff that could fit in a bucket. Not all the stuff you need, but all the stuff that you can fit in a bucket that you would need to help muck out a house. And I kind of thought that was, kind of cutesy, honestly, until I read it was a vlog of a guy down in Houston saying that he told a story about a family who'd gotten trapped up in their basement by the floodwaters. And it's okay. They're not a bad story. The water got down before it got into the basement, but they had taken with them a 5-gallon bucket for nature purposes. And when everything was all said and done, they set that excrement-filled bucket out by the street, and somebody stole it because buckets are in such high demand right now that somebody was willing to cart off 4 gallons of human filth in order to get a bucket. So send buckets. Because there aren't any. Home Depot, Lowe's, all those guys, they've been out of buckets for a while now. So anyway, just practical things at this point that they need.
So I guess the moral of that story is if you're going to take a bucket in the basement, take some, garbage bags for bucket liners.
Yes, because then you can reuse the bucket. Exactly.
Yes.
And Seth, I have no lead in because I don't know what this is. What is Iron Sky?
Okay, Iron Sky is a movie that is available on Amazon Prime, and it is a European science fiction kind of campy movie. That is the premise of the movie is that Germany, some Germans somehow made it to the dark side of the moon in 1945, and so they've been building a Nazi empire that's going to attack America in 2018, and it's kind of set in the future. Came out a few years ago, and so they're coming to Earth to get to recon and stuff, and you can tell it's European made. I love Wikipedia. Iron Sky is a 2012 Finnish German Australian comic science fiction action film, and it's campy enough. So if you imagine the space between a good movie and an Asylum ripoff, and it's almost like dead in the middle of that. So it's campy, but actually, I mean, not cheesy, but it's not a great movie. It is an excellent movie for like a Netflix or an Amazon Prime watch. Well worth it. I think you would enjoy it, Mark, because it's a European version of kind of how they see Americans. So, you can look at it with your filmmaker eyes, and like I say, I think it's kind of cool and it's kind of good enough. I've had it on my watch list for a long time, and I finally broke down and watched it, and glad I did. Not a great movie, but it was very enjoyable.
What's the score out of 5?
Out of 5, I would probably give it 3.5, 3 3/4.
Well, that's what
it was kind of. It was slow to get started, but like the second half of the movie was. I mean, it picked up the pace and it was really good. And, there's this one scene where they're attacked, the Nazis are coming from the moon. And so, spoiler alerts, the Americans had armed their space station and turned it into a ship, and it was fighting, and they needed help because, there was just so many Nazis, and all of a sudden all the other spaceships, come, and
did they form
America
Voltron?
was like, you lied to us. You armed your spaceship. And they're like, you lied too. And she's like, we're Americans. We always lie. And then like around the corner, okay, who didn't arm their spaceships? And the guy from Finland kind of raises his hand. It's funny and cheesy, and like I say, not great but very enjoyable.
All right, not great but enjoyable. I'll take that. Since you brought it up, I'm currently listening to an audio book. That's not even the right word for it. An audio presentation by Audible, and it's called The Homefront, and it's an odd sort of collection of almost 30-minute radio television shows.
Martin
Sheen. Yeah. It's free through Veterans Day. So if you're an Audible subscriber, go pick it up. It's interesting and weird at the same time, but it's the basic premise is it's the home front during the run up to and through World War II, as told by recordings of Americans. So far, it's all been Americans. I'm not sure if it gets into anything else, but I'm about halfway through. And so it's FDR's fireside chats. It's, back then recording was an expensive and difficult process. So the recordings are kind of precious, and very few of them are off the cuff. They're almost all prepared. But it's interesting. They go into, flat out propaganda pieces and opposition pieces, and it's a real slice of history as told through an audio narrative. So the Homefront, hosted by Martin Sheen, free on Audible through the 1st of November. So check it out.
They had that on the Audible app you could get, and I don't know if I only ever got episode 1. Two never came down, and I ended up deleting it a while back. But I actually enjoyed at least episode 1. I thought it was good.
Yeah, they do a re-intro and an outro on every episode, and it's like 26 episodes. So you hear Martin Sheen introduce himself 26 times, and you hear thanks to this organization 26 times. That's kind of annoying. But I guess if it were put together as sort of a weekly episodic podcast drop, it would make more sense. And I kind of get the sense that that's what this was originally planned to do, and then they just bundled it up and made a quote-unquote book out of it.
Cool.
So if you're an Audible guy, and if you're a podcast guy, why aren't you an Audible guy? Check it out. And if you have never been an Audible subscriber, you can go to elementop.com/audible and use my referral link, and your first month is free. Spoiler alert, first month's free for everybody. But if you choose to keep the subscription, I get a fairly significant kickback. So you could enjoy a service and throw me some love all at the same time. I pride myself on my hosting skills. I've been doing this for about 7 years now. I have mastered in many ways the art of the transition, but I have no idea how to give you a lead into meat hacking, Miles.
Meat hacking. Doesn't that sound good? So you guys are carnivores, right?
I have been known to eat the flesh of a dead animal.
I know Seth is.
Yep.
All right. Well, I pride myself at being a carnivore. And then last year I decided to build myself a little vegetable garden around the side of the house. And doing that in Phoenix is a little tricky because, I mean, what do you grow in the desert other than cactus? Well, apparently you can grow lots of things. So I went to YouTube and sought out all these local veggie growers in the area. And there's this one dude, he's crazy. His name's the Vegan Athlete. Now, I never thought vegans were athletes. I was wrong, right? This guy is ripped. I mean, this guy is one of the fittest dudes I've ever seen. He's like one of these black belt martial arts, Zen Buddhist kung fu dudes. But he's also a great gardener. So I thought, well, he lives in Phoenix, so I'll learn about gardening. Well, I'm going watching all these shows, and one pops up about his favorite restaurant. So I thought, oh, yeah, okay, here we go. It'll be like hippie food. You eat grass or you eat a piece of lettuce or something, and I don't need that, give me steak. Anyway, I watched it, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There's this guy who started this restaurant. He's like a 25-year experienced 5-star chef, and he cooks everything. But he decided he wanted to do everything vegetarian, but as if it was a 5-star meat-based, menu. And anyway, this guy did a show about it, and it looked really weird. And I thought, maybe we'll check this out. So my wife and I went down there, and oh my God, it freaks me out even thinking about it because I can't believe I did this. This place, you look at the menu and you think you're in a regular diner with anything you want. Like, I ordered buffalo wings, and what came out were buffalo wings. I mean, I swear they were buffalo wings. They tasted like chicken. They looked like buffalo wings. I ate them and thought, I've just eaten chicken. No, it's some chemical thing that the vegans do that is a hack on chicken. So I thought, that's weird. Anyway, then I'm looking across the table and these people ordered a burger, and I'm talking about a big burger, right? And it looks like it's got 2 big meat patties in there, the whole bit, and they're eating it and they're loving it. It's not meat. It's some meat vegetable thing that these guys have hacked. They've hacked this thing. And so I said, okay, you know what? Oh, here we go. Ultimate test. I'm going to order a Philly cheesesteak sandwich at this thing, thinking, I'm going to get like cheesesteak. I mean, it's meat. He comes out. It looks like cheesesteak. It's got all the peppers and the cheese and everything, and it tasted awesome. I mean, it was absolutely brilliant. It's not meat. I don't know what it is. I walked away from that. My head's like freaked out. I think I've just gone to some alternative dimension or something because I felt like I just ate meat, but it's all vegetarian. So how is that a thing? Is this something that, 2017 they've discovered artificial meat? Because it tastes good. Have you guys ever been to a vegan restaurant like that?
I honestly, I would not know if a vegan restaurant exists in the city of Atlanta. Yeah, I got nothing.
Yeah, I mean, wasn't there?
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, isn't there something like I've seen them use like this powder stuff on like chef shows that I don't know what it is. I'm leery to try it, but if someone like you says they can't tell the difference in taste, I would give them a try. You're someone whose opinion.
It is worth a try. I mean, I'm looking at their menu right now to try to work out what's in this stuff. Okay, so let me find the buffalo wings. Our award-winning vegan wings with cucumbers, carrots, and a side of dilly ranch. But they don't tell you what's in the wings, right? Because it's a secret, I guess.
So what were the prices like? Did you pay a premium for non-meat meat?
No, $5.50 for buffalo wings.
Okay, that's average. Good. Yeah.
And then like a burger. Let me find the burger here. Okay, classic burger, $6.25. I'm trying to look for anything here that gives an idea. Here we go. It says substitute. No, I can't find out what it is. There's a secret here. They're not telling me.
There's the big whack. 2 hand-packed vegan patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun.
Oh, man. I don't know what it is. But they're not telling you, are they? They're not. Okay, right. The secret. I've got to find the secret. I need to know how they do this because it tastes like meat. Anyway, that's it. I just so freaked out. My head's still spinning from this whole, that was meat, right? Experience. Anyway, that's it. That's all I got to say.
That sounds interesting. I mean, it is true that the world is running into a protein shortage, a meat shortage, and vegetarian, vegan, solutions, or eating crickets. Those are kind of the only 2 ways we can go. We can't grow any more cows any faster or any more pigs any faster than we're doing it. So we need to either eat crickets or figure out how to make vegetables taste like meat. So I'm all on board with making vegetables taste like meat. I'm interested in it, but I like my meat. It needs to taste like meat.
Seriously, if you guys do come to Phoenix, I'll take you there and I'll freak you out because you'll walk away going, that was really good.
So, Miles, not to be crude, but were the latter end of the consumption process, did you pay a price for that, as sometimes do with substitute items?
No, I did not. At least nothing out of the ordinary.
Okay, so a couple of days later, you didn't regret those chicken wings?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope, not at all.
We actually talked about what you were referring to, Mark, in a Bible class today at church. And it was like, for example, here's, we were talking about the sacrifices in Leviticus. And, but I brought up how for example, if I were to eat vegetables and stuff, say it takes a yard of vegetables to feed me for a day. And, that's just a number I pulled out of the hat. But if I choose to eat meat, then it took that cow a yard of vegetables for several days, eating me for less. And so the cow eats the food and then I eat the cow. So that cow had to survive for a long time. That had I been eating the food, there would have been more of it to go around. And so we just...
Yeah, what you're referring to, it's called the conversion rate. And anytime you're raising an animal for food, you're interested in the conversion rate. Chickens have the lowest or the most efficient conversion rate of any livestock animal. Beef has the worst conversion rate of any meat animal. Sharks are like the worst ever recorded. Lions come right into that. A lion, say 100 pounds of lion takes 98 pounds of hyena to run it. So yeah, conversion rate. Crickets, amazing conversion rate. So, it's all about the crickets.
Well, chocolate covered, dipped in honey. It might not be so bad.
I have had a couple of cricket protein bars, and had I not known they were crickets, I would not know they were crickets. However, I did not think they were dates or, anything. I could tell this was not something I'd ever eaten before. I just wouldn't have known it was crickets.
Right. What's the Snowpiercer with the guy who played Captain America?
No spoilers. Haven't seen it.
You haven't? Oh, yeah. Okay. Well,
it's on the list.
Been out for a few years.
Yeah, it's on the list. There is a statute of limitations. The way I see it, once something has made it to DVD and or streaming, spoilers are allowed. Because at that point, it's on you. Yeah.
I agree. I'm sick of having to walk around like I'm on broken glass all the time because of spoilers.
Now, that's not true in the case of, say, Marvel's Defenders, which went straight to Netflix. So you gotta give it a leeway there. So 3 months or so, that seems fair. 6
weeks. How about that?
Yeah. Okay. But see,
look out, if it's listeners, we warned you.
If it's a 13-week series, and I like to watch an episode a week, I'm not a binge watcher. You got to give me 13 weeks, right?
Well, right. Yeah, right. Fair enough. Say 6 weeks from the last episode of the series.
But if they're all dumped at the same... Yeah, anyway. See, this is why it's hard. This is why it's hard to get along in 2017, because everybody's super sensitive about something. All right, I'm going to move on to some listener feedback. And this first one, I'm almost certain I'm going to mispronounce the name, and I don't fully understand the context of the message, but it came with $10, so I'm going to pay attention. It was from Laurent. I'm going with Lorant. He says, I'm a listener from Hungary, in parentheses, Finland. I don't understand that. Aren't those entirely separate but linked countries?
Maybe lives in one is from the other.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Maybe that's a town or a township.
I Googled Hungary, Finland, and I didn't find that. Or maybe I live in Hungary now, and I'm from Finland. That makes sense to me. Anyway, it says, I'm a listener from Hungary, parentheses, Finland. I agree with pay for what you like, so keep up the good work, and more will follow. So he just threw down the gauntlet. Dude, you want money? Do the work. I'm all about that. Fine. So, yes, Laurent, I will.
Man of action. I like it.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Yes, indeed. And then in a circuitous bit of feedback that came in through the email but then got bounced because of the nature of the way that the attachment was sent and whatever, yada, yada, our good friend the Door-to-Door Geek reminds us that there are not 3 but 4 credit consumer information agencies. A direct quote from Wikipedia, most U.S. consumer credit information is collected by and kept by 4 national traditional consumer reporting agencies: Experian, formerly TRW Information Systems and Services, and the CCN Group; Equifax, TransUnion, and Innovis, which was purchased from First Data Corporation in 1999 by CBC companies. These organizations are for-profit businesses and possess no government affiliation. I have never heard of Innovis. So there's another sneaky one out there, apparently.
Yeah. Like we need more.
We really do, to keep the others honest. I think that will help a whole lot. Although I came across this story, when I was looking for we used to do this thing called news, where I would come up with stories if we would talk about them once in a while. And I still do, just to give me something to do on the weekends. But one of the articles referenced the big 3 consumers, consumer credit agencies. So it didn't say there were only 3, but it referenced the big 3. So
sense.
It's sort of like how, in automobile industry, you used to have the big 3, GM, Ford, and Chrysler. And then, Chrysler became Dodge Chrysler and Daimler Chrysler, and then Ford bought Jaguar and all these others. And there's a whole bunch of others. And then, American car companies decided to quit innovating and just trust the stupid American public to buy American cars. And the Japanese cars got really, anyway, so there's a whole bunch, but it was always the big 3 automotive makers. So,
yeah, I must say, after I read that email, I thought, I've never heard of this 4, but, I'm certainly could be correct. And so maybe I was just a bit more sensitive to hearing all this news, because all week it's been Equifax. Maybe we were ahead of the news curve or something with our show, but I watched every single news network from CNN to CBS, ABC, Fox. Everybody said the big 3. Everybody said it. And even Off the Hook, the Hacker podcast, had their rant about Experian, and again said the big 3. And I'm thinking, well, I must be in the majority to be saying the big 3 as well, but we're probably all wrong. If there's a 4th, there's probably a 5th. And if there's a 5th, there's probably a 6th. And all I know is they shouldn't all be gone, and we don't need them to have our data.
Well, clearly it's the hidden 4th one that we need most be afraid of. They're skulking behind the shadows.
They will rise from the ashes.
So
Could very well be.
PedantNet, just know that you are well represented by our friend the Door-to-Door Geek. And then this one is old. It's been sitting in my in basket for about a month now, and I apologize, Rick. I have nothing but the sincerest apologies. It got skipped in my in basket. But our old friend Rick let us know of a new use for the Bitcoin. He says, I cannot be the first to send you this. You are, Rick. And I'm using a bit.ly link because for some stupid reason the regular link triggered the spam filter. And it says, now Miles has a new reason to go to Vegas. And it's a Mashable article about a strip club that now lets you tip the strippers with Bitcoin.
I love the QR codes on their arms, apparently. You just scan their arms and tip them. Go figure.
It makes it a lot less fun to slip the phone into the G-string, though.
Well, no, see, this way now you can take pictures and act like you're tipping them and they won't know. So kudos.
That's a good point. I don't know. I've never been to a strip club. Are you not allowed to use your phone there? Is that a rule?
I don't know. I was just going for the joke. So,
but I love the fact that, whether it's representative or not, the picture that Mashable has picked up is a busty woman with a QR code stamped on her boob, which is just awesome in itself right there. So
priceless.
Maybe there's different codes on different parts of their bodies and they can track which one generates the most revenue. I mean, that would be an interesting way to really get your marketing data and your metrics to know what your consumers want. Yeah. Sorry.
The article says the lap dances are where it gets interesting. During the event, dancers will be wearing strategically placed temporary tattoo with a QR code. If you want to tip a dancer, wave the phone over the tattoo, and voila, you're doing Vegas crypto style. If you're still unsure whether all this is too adult only to bring your underage nephew along, just keep in mind that the place will be teaming with porn stars during the event, including Jessie Jane and Tasha Rain. I don't know what event, and I don't know who any of those people are, but it's a thing. So there you go.
The Bitcoin. The Bitcoin.
It is. Porn is almost always the first to try new technologies.
And, a lot of times they're the driver of, they were the driver of DVDs. So
right.
They get around the problem of how do you swipe a credit card?
Yes, they do.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just, and while we're on the subject, China has officially banned Bitcoin exchanges in their country, or is it still unofficial? It was a leaked document. I wasn't sure if the leaked document had become official yet. But
it was official Friday night.
So you can have Bitcoin, you just can't change Bitcoin into Chinese yuan. That's the issue.
And it knocked it off of, it kind of put a slow on the meteoric rise of Bitcoin.
Yeah, from 5,000 to about 3,500 last I looked.
Yeah, the funny thing is, though, I think it was in 2014 or 2015. I can't even remember who said this, but it was somebody notable in the Bitcoin community had said anytime China bans something, Bitcoin always recovers really, really well, far more than it was before it got banned. So there's historical precedent that whatever the price drive that dropped it down because of this banning, everybody saw that as a buy opportunity and hold into it. So we should see a serious recovery coming up soon. But it's not investment advice.
You could go the conspiracy theory route that China did that to drive the price down so they could load up and then dump high. So yeah. I wouldn't, that would be a neat way for a nation state to raise currency.
And also it's
manipulate a market.
You've had the government complicit issue with the Bitcoin mining chips that only work at their peak efficiency in China. So this would be a complete policy reversal change, although that policy was unofficial. So this would be not so much an official one, but maybe it is the point where they have gotten to the point where they no longer have dominance. The speed up in their chip is no longer enough to make them dominant. So they're just going to close the door on that. I don't know.
I don't think that was the biggest news this week for Bitcoin that might have had a price effect, though. Apparently on CNBC this week, Jamie Dimon, the president or chairman or whatever of Chase Bank, of JP Morgan Chase, went full tilt mental and said
Bitcoin
that
is
Bitcoin was a fraud. And oh my gosh, did he get the Bitcoin community all riled up? They're ready to. Apparently, he's firing anybody who works at Chase that trades in Bitcoin, or any of his traders have bought anything Bitcoin. They're fired immediately
For being stupid.
Yeah, but if you look at the return on investment they've probably gotten for their investment over the last 12 months, it's funny. I was looking back over some old tweets that I had posted about a year ago, back in, I think it was like New Year's Eve this year. And I was going on about how we might even see a Bitcoin price over $1,000 then.
Right.
I mean, what? That was 9 months ago now, It seems like ancient history. I don't know too many people who are getting that sort of return on the S&P.
Well, the follow-up news story to that, and I don't have any links to it, was that some people did some searching through public records and found that his company was the biggest buyer of Bitcoin futures.
Apparently his daughter owns a lot of Bitcoin too. Jamie,
I wish I went and I bought one Bitcoin whenever it looked like Donald Trump was going to win the presidency. I was like, that's something no one was expecting. Bitcoin is going to go up on this. So I bought, but because of how long it takes Coinbase to allow you to access what you bought, it had kind of came off that high a little bit. And I waited. I paid around 700. Once it got back up to about 750 or so, I went ahead and cashed out. Man, I wish I would have held on to it for just a few months.
Well, hindsight's 20/20.
Yeah.
Yep.
I bought Bitcoin at 200. I think it might have been 400, but I think it was 200. And now it's up,
It was 400 and you bought a half.
Yeah. Okay. So I bought at 400. And so it's now up. It has been over 10 times, and now it's just under 10 times. And I bought Ether at 13, and it's at 300. So that's 20 times. So I've done all right. I just wish I had invested more. If I had thrown 50,000 into that, I wouldn't have to be begging you for money or doing this show on a Windows Vista laptop.
Right.
Okay, so this week, this whole September thing was supposed to be about strategies, because it's alliterative, and I like alliterations. Strategic September, and we were going to talk about a strategy for storage the first month, the first week of the month, and then we didn't. And then we were going to talk about the second week of the month, and then we didn't. And so, finally, we're going to talk about FreeNAS. We have talked about FreeNAS in the past, and Unraid, something that Chris was a big fan of. But going back over the notes, it's been like 2 years since we've talked about any storage at all. So for those of you who are saying you've done this one before, yeah, we have, but it's been a while. Maybe a few things have changed. So Miles, FreeNAS, go.
Well, actually, before I get into the FreeNAS thing, I was going to suggest maybe you guys could talk about what is a NAS and why would you want one?
Okay. So NAS stands for Network Attached Storage, and that's just what it is. It's there's the super low level dumb, I'm just a box of storage sitting somewhere, and we all probably have that now in the form of a USB plugged hard drive that you plug in once in a while. If you have that plugged into the back of your router, like say so many routers have that ability, you have a NAS. If you've got a Raspberry Pi somewhere sitting around that you can FTP into or SSH into, you have a NAS. If back in the day, I was in love with my Pogo Plug device, which was one of the first commercial NAS boxes like that, and you could plug multiple things in. Now, if you go up into the really fancy stuff like a Drobo, that's a NAS, and you can plug in, it's called a JBOD array, just a bunch of disks. You can plug in any disk of any size and of any speed, and it will sort of come up with the least common denominator and take all those disks and make a single chunk of space out of it. But it's costly. So let's say you give it, depending on the configuration, say you give it 5 terabytes of stuff, you may only be able to use 4 terabytes of it. because of the way JBOD can be expensive. But a NAS is just that, network attached storage. Now, something called eSATA, which is a SATA connection. SATA is the red cables inside your PC right now. It's the standard communication device, serial attached transport adapter. Quick, somebody Google that. But anyway, it's sort of the standard right now. And then eSATA is a networked version of that same protocol that gives you almost, it's really, maybe even truly. It's hard to say whether it's almost or truly. It depends so much. But you can get the same kind of performance over a gig network connection with a NAS, in another part of your complex, or even another part of the country, if you have true gigabit connection to it, that you would get with the hard drive in your PC connected with a SATA device. So if you can have one of those, a network attached storage essentially becomes then a hard drive, external hard drive with internal level performance that you can attach to multiple devices. So there's my overview of NAS.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate one. I mean, here's the interesting thing that I've kind of looked at a 1,000-foot view. If you look at the amount of storage that you need to, firstly, stuff that we have in our lives, in our homes, our families, all this sort of thing, whether it be photographs or whether it be movies or video or whatever, it's all gone digital. That happened in the 90s. It continued into the 2000s, and it went Uber in 2000, the last 7 years or so. And so the interesting thing is that the hard drive manufacturers keep making these bigger hard drives to store more digital stuff. So you can buy like a 10 terabyte drive now, and they're not that expensive. I mean, for the price that you used to pay for 100 megabytes 20 years ago, you can have 10 terabytes. So, why wouldn't you, right? It's $200, $300, and you can store everything you'd ever want. Well, that's all great, but how does everybody in the house get access to it? Because we're all using tablets and phones and TVs and computers and everything else. And so you kind of want to put it somewhere. So you need a way to get to it. And you need a device which is on a network that you can connect to get to your stuff. And unfortunately, it still is a bit of a sort of, the black art of the geeks in terms of how you share this stuff out to be compatible with as many devices as possible using this or that protocol. And it's something my grandmother could never do. And it's always been, the den of the geeks. But at the end of the day, if you've got an old computer and you put a couple of these big drives in it, you have the same equivalent of Dropbox or any of these online streaming storage places at much higher speed with no cost of bandwidth, and it's right there in your house. And that's kind of a holy grail for a lot of people, especially if you've got a lot of movies and a lot of TV shows you watch and you're not streaming everything. So there is a need for network attached storage. But the problem is that it's become less and less of a thing because there's more and more streaming storage availability. Like, you don't need to have a massive video library anymore if you've got Netflix and Amazon Prime, because you can probably just get it over the internet and watch it at your convenience, right? The same is true with music collections. You don't need to have a big music collection if you've got Spotify, but you pay for this stuff, and you pay for it. There's a convenience cost, albeit it's really not that expensive, but it's still a convenience cost. And some people want to have it under their own control. And that's where a NAS becomes the default way of doing things. So I personally like the idea of having my own mass storage, but I also realize that with great power comes great responsibility, because you got to back that stuff up. And you've got to know what you're doing technically to be able to make it work. So if you're the listener of this podcast, you probably do. You probably know those things. You probably know you got to back this stuff up. You probably know how to do NFS or SMB shares or whatever the case is. You know how to set up the clients. You know how to set security and permissions, because we probably do that in our daily job, or it's just something we've had to do over the years. But for the average, my grandma's not doing that stuff, so she wouldn't know how to do it. So this isn't for everybody. So that's kind of the background. If you're willing to go down that path, there are great rewards in that you can put everything you've ever got in central storage and everybody can get access to it, even from outside of your house if you know about, you're willing to do the security thing to make it all work. The question comes down to how do you store it, where do you store it, and what are the tricks and traps and pitfalls of doing this sort of thing.
And I just want to interject here a couple of things. One, Jinda bails me out. Serial Advanced Technology Attachment, SATA. Thank you, Jinda. But also, all the stuff that you talked about, the setting up of the storage and all that, the cost of doing that in terms of time and energy and energy as in electricity is very minimal. A Raspberry Pi PC running without a fan quietly in your closet can do a full-on RAID array and handle all these things that you're talking about, the SMB, all the different things. The Pogo Plug device that I was talking about, it was an old, cell phone processor is what it ran. So people have known, your Roku has more power necessary than is necessary to do this sort of stuff. But back in the early days of this sort of stuff, it took big iron to do it, and people still think in terms of I need a rack of servers to have network attached storage, but you really don't. Like I said, I have a USB hard drive plugged into to the back of my router that's shared with Samba, and so my Windows devices just connect to it as if it were another drive, and that requires nothing, right? Of course, it's the lowest possible way to do NAS. It's not backed up, it's not redundant, it's none of that. It's just a drive plugged into a box. But what Miles is going to tell you here, lest you think this is over my head, the hardware is easy to obtain and inexpensive, and the software, particularly what he's going to mention here, is pretty point and click simple for anybody with any kind of technical ability at all. Maybe not grandma, but certainly your 12-year-old cousin could work his way through it.
Yeah. Actually, before I launch into that, Seth, what do you use for network storage?
I really don't have any network storage because I'm the only one in my house who needs it. So I have a USB drive that I use. I have the spot on my wireless router. I've just never plugged anything in. Okay.
All right. So yeah, that wireless router thing is something that probably came about in the last 5 years or so, because I remember installing various routers and access points and so on, because I haven't had to reinstall them at my house. All my stuff was really old school and it never had those sort of attachments. I started to see those creeping in over the last 5 years or so, but meanwhile I'd already gone and built some ridiculous storage thing, so I didn't really need it. That's the other thing about storage. To geeks, it's kind of like car hobbyists. It's like you got to brag to your friends about how much storage you've got. It's like horsepower in your car engine. I've got 24 terabytes of storage. It's a manly thing.
Is that 7,200 or 5,400 RPM?
Oh, hey.
10,000 Raptor speed, baby.
There you go. Western Digital Red. Yeah, so it's sort of sad. Anyway, okay, so if you want to do it, see, here's a whole bunch of things you could do. You could go and get yourself a Raspberry Pi or an old PC that was, going to get thrown out or donated to Goodwill.
Let me just interject here real quick. Sorry.
Sure.
The PC power supply connected to that old PC, plugged in but not turned on, uses more energy than a Raspberry Pi at full speed. Just going to leave it at that.
That is true. That is true. So here's the thing about storage. You need some redundancy, and this is the thing that is important. Now, if you're putting stuff on Dropbox, they're doing all the heavy lifting. They've got the backups. They've got the redundancy. If something goes down, it's their problem. They'll deal with it. We hope. If you're doing it yourself, it's now on you. So if you go and get one of these glorious 10 terabyte hard drives and plug it into something, here's my rule. For every terabyte of data you put on your NAS, you better have the same terabyte of data somewhere in a backup. So if you want to go and do the 24 or the 30 or the 60 terabyte NAS because you want all that storage, well, you better also have an exact version of that as a backup for when the NAS fails. Because I guarantee if you have to report to your wife that you lost the kid's photo album, it ain't going to end well for you. And so you better be prepared to back everything up and guarantee that the backups are 100% synchronized as often as you possibly can. And that means more geek cred required because now you've got to build effectively 2 of them. Having said all of that...
One of them off-site.
Sorry?
One of them off-site, ideally.
Ideally, yes. But again, that's relying on you having the bandwidth to be able to push 24 terabytes worth of data out of your house into your backup. And so that often can be issues. So anyway, look,
and here's, I want to interject something. Even if you can't go off site, at the very least, put it on a different circuit in your house. Most people don't think about that, and they'll put the 2 servers right next to each other. But ideally, if you can't go somewhere else, put one on the other side of your house on a different circuit. Because if something blows one circuit, it might not blow the other. If a tornado takes out part of your house, it might leave the other. So you can maybe not get the benefits of off-site, but you can kind of mitigate putting everything right next to each other. And that's something you don't think about until the tornado hits and you're like, why didn't I put it in the other room? You know, so that's just something to think about now. Not that any geeks are ever going to do that, but you know, we'll tell people to. But
you bring up a good point. I mean, power is we in the data center world don't really have to deal with that because we've got massive UPSs and diesel generators backing them up, and we're on 4 different power circuits from different providers. But you pay a premium for that, but you forget about it after a while, and it always just works. But in your house, you don't have that, so you've got to have your own UPS. Otherwise, you're going to put all of your family photo album on this hard drive, and the power's going to go out, and the hard drive's going to die, and you're probably going to get killed by your wife. So you better have a UPS. And the thing with UPSs is the batteries last about 3 years before they start making annoying beeping noises, and you're going out to Amazon to buy replacement batteries. So this is an ongoing cost. Now, I'm not trying to put anybody off doing a NAS. I'm not. But I'm saying go in eyes wide open. You need 2 of them. You need UPSs. And then you need the skills to be able to put all of that together. But you can do it. It's not that difficult. But that's at least the minimum starting point.
A little redneck UPS hack. If you go down to your local hardware store or Walmart and buy a couple of deep cycle marine batteries, you can tie those into the battery receptacle on the regular UPS that you would buy at Office Max. And not only will it give you far more battery life, but it will last a long time. And that trickle charge will charge those. At that point, you're getting, 3 to 5 years is pretty standard. But you could get with two deep cycle marine batteries chained in series to that box there, you could take your UPS and make it last 3 to 5 days of power outage. Just something to, if you're a total speeds and feeds nerd, it's a fun project. I built that for when I was in schools. That was what was powering our central communication system, the IP-based phone system. I made sure that whatever else happened, those would run. And so I had a big beefy UPS that would actually handle the PoE for the phones and everything, and powered that off of a big UPS, and then chained several marine batteries to that. So fun stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. That does work. Yeah, I agree with you. I always, what I do? I hate the fact that people throw UPSs out as soon as the battery runs out. Mm-hmm. It's such a waste. It's like throwing your printer out because you ran out of toner. I mean, it's ridiculous.
I carry one in my car with me that I have soldered battery clamps onto, so that if I'm ever out and I need to power something, I can hook it straight up to my car, because it's a handy source of power.
That's cool. That's very cool. Yeah, but if if you've got a UPS and the battery dies, just do a search on Amazon for replacement battery for that model, and you'll find you can buy them for $20-$30 plus shipping. It's there's a lot of companies out there that sort of recycle batteries and will sell another one, and get a few more years out of your UPS, and you won't be paying $200 each 3 years for it. Anyway, that aside, so you want to build a NAS. So one of the things that you want to do is you want to do it in some sort of a computer or a case or something that can handle multiple hard drives. You may ask, well, if I buy a 10 terabyte drive, why do I need more of them? Well, because the 10 terabyte drive might die. So you need something at least within the storage, which is going to do some sort of redundant storage. And there's a whole bunch of ways of doing it. There is the old ways of doing it, which the enterprise or the data center prefers, and that would be RAID, which is a way of doing redundant drives or storing things across many hard drives. So if one dies, the others can recover automatically from it. That can be very expensive because you have to buy expensive cards, and then you have to have enterprise class hardware to run it. And then all the drives have got to be the same type or model or size that matches so that they can be spread across the RAID array. And it's another technical hurdle that you're going to have to overcome again to even get to the point where you can install this NAS stuff. But it is a way of doing it. But there are other ways of doing it. And the particular ones which I'm sort of talking about today are non-RAID storage methods that give you some redundancy. So the first one's one that I actually use. I've been using for probably, it must be at least 10 years, if not longer. And that's a program called Unraid. And what Unraid is, I think it's a free download for just a couple of disks. But if you need more than that, you pay them a nominal fee. But it's basically software RAID or software redundant storage across multiple hard drives that's managed by a central server that also happens to do all of the sharing and so on. And it's very good. It's very reliable. It works extremely well. I've had Unraid servers for decades, and when they die or when a hard drive dies, it will automatically recover from what they call a parity drive. And it will keep running so that you just check on it. You say, oh, my drive's died. You pull the thing out, you put a new one in, you wait for it to initialize the drive, and it puts the whole thing back together again as if nothing happened. It's a good investment, and it works well. And with newer hardware, you can support, multiple 40, 50 terabytes of storage on these things without too much difficulty. And I think you probably pay maybe $100 or something for the software to do it, and it will work on most older hardware, but you've got to have hardware that can handle and address large disk sizes. So that might mean that you do have to upgrade to something. So that's one way of doing it, and it's fairly easy to do. It's not too complicated. The other options are the open source NAS solutions, and there really are probably two dominant ones. One is called OpenFiler, and the other one's called FreeNAS. Now, OpenFiler used to be a thing, and it kind of died a natural death. It was one of those projects that they didn't release a new version for years, and eventually everyone said, whatever happened to? And it was, one of those things that kind of went along the wayside. It predominantly lost out its appeal to this project called FreeNAS, which I think you can get to at freenas.org or freenas.com. And FreeNAS has not necessarily gone through a life of ease and convenience either, because it's gone, I think it's at version 11 right now. And round about version 9, where they had a pretty good release of FreeNAS, they tried to go to version 10 and everything went went down the toilet for them. And at the end, I think the chairman of the project, or the project lead, threw his arms up and quit. And eventually other people had to take it over. And eventually they sort of brought it back from the ashes, and now FreeNAS 11 is a thing. And it's pretty good. I've got FreeNAS running in commercial environments, serving commercial servers. and it's pretty reliable. It itself does not really go down per se. It doesn't require a lot of really expensive hardware to run. The things that it does require is a lot of memory. It needs at least 8 gigabytes of RAM to run. Does a lot of things in memory. And as far as the, it doesn't use RAID as its storage. It uses a protocol called ZFS. And ZFS is one of those interesting, what they call journaling file systems that allows you to spread your data using kind of a soft RAID type technology across multiple drives. And again, if one goes down, it's able to recover by recovering a journal and sort of putting everything back together again. Sometimes you've got to intervene with it, and it's not too bad. It's pretty reliable for that sort of thing. But it comes with this really cool technology called snapshotting, and that allows you to take a copy of everything you got stored in a volume, or, you know, like a virtual storage bin, if you like, and copy it to something else. So you could put like an external drive or something like that, and you can snapshot to that storage mechanism, and that's how you do your backups. It's extremely quick. It'll keep a delta between what the previous backup was and what was currently on your system. So you only have to deal with the changes between, say, each day that you're backing it up, but it will put it all back together for you. It's quick, it's reliable, and so far so good. In my experience, I've had FreeNAS running in commercial environments now for about 2 years, and they have been pretty good. I haven't had too many issues. So really, that's kind of a very high level overview to these things. So I mean, that's been my experience. What's been your experience, Mark?
So I used FreeNAS in the enterprise environment there when I was a school IT guy. Ran it, if I remember correctly, it's BSD based, right? Or have they moved on to something else?
Still BSD.
All right. So yeah, it's a BSD based system, which doesn't really mean anything. It's just it's not Unix. It's not Linux. It's BSD. It's a Unix derivative in the same way that Linux is a BSD derivative. But if you're familiar with Linux, you'll be fine. You'll be dropped down and use all the commands you're used to using. But it just worked. It was a GUI setup. As I remember, I set up the OS on a flash drive, plugged into a spare old like Pentium era server. Right. So it was an old server that we had long since decommissioned, but it had the I think SCSI is actually what I was running card in it, and so the FreeNAS was running on a flash drive, and I think that's still how they like to recommend it. You don't put your OS on your data, you keep them separate. So you install FreeNAS on a flash drive, and then it uses all the hard drive space it can find in the machine, and it automatically figures out the best configuration for you. Based on the drive. So it surveys your drives, sees what kind they are, what size they are, and just says, you want to use all of it or as much as you can of it? And you say yes, and it goes. And it's got all the built-in FTP, SCP, SMB. What's the Apple one? I don't even know. But it's all there, and it all works without ever having to drop down to the command line. It's a web-based interface, or at least the last time I used it, it was, and it just works. And so there's just no reason not to use that if you've got the hardware. I don't know if FreeNAS will work on a Raspberry Pi. I haven't tried, but if you've got a PC laying around, I can almost guarantee you it will work on that. And you just stick in whatever drives you've got, and it works, and it's seamless, and it's good. So that's my review of FreeNAS.
Well, I'm with you on that. My only concern with FreeNAS was that if they're advertising that you could pick up any old PC and just pop it on and you're up and running, there's a lot of that's not true. You need 8 gigs of RAM. So whatever you've got, it's got to have 8 gigs of RAM. So getting that on a Raspberry Pi might be a bit of it may not be impossible, but it might be a bit difficult.
Well, 11 now, yes. I'm on their website now. FreeNAS 11 requires 8 gigs of RAM. The one I was using way back when, it was 4-ish or less. So
Right.
whatever reason, whatever their architecture changes, they now require more RAM.
Yeah. And then, of course, the other thing is that these larger hard drives are often not compatible with motherboard SATA connections. They won't recognize the capacities, which, I guess motherboards were not able to predict the rise of storage. The drives are going to get that big, and they're going to get bigger. So if you've got an old computer, it may be that it limits the size of the drive that it can see at 2 terabytes, for example. You're going to need to be able to address larger capacities, and many of them. So that may put you into, I've got to buy a new motherboard to run this thing. Having said that, it's not that expensive to buy a motherboard and CPU combo to replace out the one you've already got in a computer box that only needs to be able to address 8 gigs of RAM and large hard drives.
Yeah, you could buy a CPU case, power supply, RAM for $300-ish.
Yeah. Now, you're going to need a power supply that's going to be able to power all the drives. But if you're not using legacy drives, like this is an interesting kind of negative return you get with hard drives. I'm sure that there's a lot of us out there that over the years have been upgrading computers in our house, and we've got like old hard drives lying around that you didn't want to get away because it used to have somebody's tax return on it and you didn't want to give it to anybody. And so you've got this collection of hard drives stacking up in a box somewhere in the garage, and you're thinking, well, maybe I could just use those in my RAID array or my unRAID array or my FreeNAS array or whatever. Well, yeah, you can, but each one of those is going to take a slot in your case, and each one of those is going to take a power supply connector, and each one of those is going to take power to run it. And if they're only 1 or 2 terabyte drives, do you really want to do that? And so when you're building this stuff, it's really, really easy to sit there and go, I'm just going to spend a lot of money. And I'm just going to buy like 3 10 terabyte drives and a massive computer with a ton of RAM and all this network stuff. And, I'm going to go great because I want my 24 terabytes of storage. It's very easy to fall into that trap. But just remember, this stuff changes all the time. Today it's 10 terabytes. Tomorrow it's 16. Today it's this chip. Tomorrow it's that chip. Buy for the period of time that's reasonable for your use case. The one thing I will say about NAS is they're not the sort of thing you really want to be upgrading all the time. And maybe you need it for storage, but after a while it becomes a bit of a burden. You kind of want to just stick it in the closet, shut the door and forget about it. And it's just there. But, if you're buying not the most recent stuff, or you're too recent, or you're way, way behind the curve, then you're constantly opening the closet all the time and upgrading it. And after a while, it becomes kind of an annoyance rather than an enjoyable experience. So, and it's always stressful because you got the wife's family photo album there, and you're going to get killed if it dies. So you don't want to be mistakenly destroying it.
Miles' wife is very violent.
Oh, yeah. You don't be touching the photo album. I can tell you that.
Never piss off an Aussie woman, apparently.
No. So anyway, that's kind of where I would leave it. It's like, pick the right hardware and the right combination. And here's the really cool thing. FreeNAS is free. They do have some commercial offerings where they bundle it with their hardware and mark it up and so on, and that helps the project, and I'm sure that's good. But like I said, you're probably going to be upgrading hardware as you go through this thing. So don't, getting a free operating system ain't such a bad thing. But again, as we would say, Mark, you can say this, I'll let you go. Say the slogan.
Pay for what you like.
There you go.
So if you want to buy, I'm on Amazon right now, homeandopie.com/Amazon. If you want to buy a FreeNAS Mini, it's $1,000 with no discs in it. The hardware you get is not worth $1,000. You're donating to the project. Just know that that's what's happening and pay for it. However, you can get a 2-base Synology that runs with and is on the approved list for FreeNAS box for $169. Again, diskless. You can get, I'm just scanning through here. You can get a 4 or 6 bay drive for $500 or so, which is about what you would pay to piece together all your own things. So at that point, it's worthwhile to just have somebody else do it, unless you just want to do it for the fun of doing it. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, but don't forget you're going to need 2 of them, because you've got to back that thing up. So you're going to need to have a way to do the secondary system, and ideally you need to have a way to set it up so you segment the files that are critical, that you can afford to you can't afford to live without, and they will need to go somewhere out into the off-site world. So you may end up having to pay for a Dropbox or a similar service anyway, just to be able to have some redundancy in those areas. So it doesn't mean that, your entire Star Trek video collection has to go out there, unless you really want to send a lot of stuff out there. But certainly the family stuff and your tax documents and all the things you can't afford to live without need to get backed up.
Yes, I'm looking here again on Amazon. You can get a 5-bay NAS for $400. So that's everything but the 5 hard drives that you would need for $400. Amazon Prime shipped to you in a couple of days. If you're a more money than time kind of person, then that's absolutely the way to go. So throw in some drives. Let's say it goes up to 500, and then you want to buy 2 of them. So for $1,000, you can protect everything, within an afternoon of configuration. If your wife's as mean as Miles is, $1,000 is worth it.
Well, the other thing, I think you probably want to go with 3 drives, maybe not 2, because then you can take advantage of the journaling and the parody drive setup and everything like that too.
Well, no, I was saying 2 boxes of up to say 4 drives is what I was talking about. Yeah,
that'll work. I guess your backup server doesn't have to be anywhere near as sophisticated or as fast as your primary as well. You may be able to save a little money on that. But if you just want to get 2 of everything and be done with it, then do that, and happy wife, happy life.
And of course, the much less expensive up front, but more expensive over time method is to use a service like Carbonite or CrashPlan. They still have their commercial things, and you pay them X amount per month for infinity, and you let them worry about it. Or you buy the giant Dropbox plan, or you pay for Google Drive. With Google Drive, you can now put a shim in on your computer and treat it like a regular mapped drive, assuming your backup, assuming your internet speed is fast enough. That's plenty fast to stream a movie. Most people don't need super high data access anymore. Whatever you're getting over your internet, most of the time is good enough. We're not usually shunting giant files across, and we need to do it in real time. So there's lots of other options out there, but this was just the geek's way of doing it yourself.
It's certainly interesting, isn't it, how things are changing, because we don't think about this stuff as much because everything's streamed, right? Like what do you care about having to have a massive video library like we used to do 10 years ago or so, because everything's on Netflix. Just get it when you want it, watch it, and that's it. But if you've got a collection of stuff and you value that collection, you got to store it, and then you've got the responsibility of making sure that it's stored properly. So there's still a lot of need and room for network storage in your house. And I'm a fan of them. I think they're great. I think you should have a big NAS and brag to your friends.
I took the time to digitally remaster all of my video cassette tapes, all the VHS stuff. I wasn't content to just go buy them all again for $19 a piece. I ran them through a camcorder and actually converted them into MP4 files painstakingly, one at a time. But I now have my collection going all the way back to Forrest Gump in 1994, before there was such a thing as a DVD player, or at least before it was commercially common. And so I have all of those, plus my DVDs. Between all that, I have in the neighborhood of 400 movies, plus entire runs of TV shows like both Star Trek: The Next Generation and the original, and all of that fits on a 1.5 terabyte drive. So to say Miles is talking, choose either 24 or 48 terabytes. Yeah, let's just bring it back down to life here. My entire collection sits on a 1.5 terabyte drive.
Yeah, but you know what they say about closet space. The more you got, the more you store.
Probably. So, Seth, you've been uncharacteristically quiet. What do you have to say?
Well, I'm listening to us. If our past selves could come and listen to this conversation, they would berate us for how much we rely on streaming media and how we don't have local copies of the stuff we're getting online. So, in one sense, you almost have to try to puke up the red pill and go back to storing stuff locally, because nowadays the average person isn't going to do this. I mean, I think it's cool, and I keep trying to come up with a reason, set up an NAS, and I just I really don't have one. So, I've got a handful of DVDs I could, rip over, but I don't have much of a reason. So I'm hoping I'll be quiet enough that they don't come take my geek card.
See, I don't, as a rule, I don't buy things on like Amazon Prime or Google Play. I buy the medium because I want to own it. I don't want Google Play to decide, or Netflix is the great example, to decide, well, my contract's up, that thing's going away. If I want it, I want it. If I want enough to buy it, I'm going to buy it. So oftentimes what I will do is I will buy the Google Play version just because my kids want to watch it now, and then I'll go to the store and pick up the DVD and throw it to my archive. So now I've spent $40 for it, but that's less than half of what it would cost if I'd taken them to the movie. So it's a win-win all the way around.
True. Yeah. It is interesting, though, how if you go back in time and you look maybe at 5 or 10 years ago, the conversations we were having were berating, Apple for having DRM on their content. So you couldn't download that music program file, rip a CD, whatever it is, because the man was out to get you, and the licensing and the copyright and yada, yada, yada. And then out of that spawned Pirate Bay and all these sites like that. Well, that's not really a thing anymore, because one of the reasons why there was such a need for it was the convenience that was not there to get access to content. Now with streaming services, the convenience is there. So we just give up that fight and we just go ahead and listen to that music on Spotify. We don't pay the artist and buy their recording. We just stream it, and they're not making any money, but we're still getting to hear it. But that's okay until you're sitting on a plane at 38,000 feet and you can't listen to anything because they got really bad Wi-Fi, or you're not allowed to stream it. And all of a sudden you're saying, well, I wish I had a copy of that movie to watch on this, 5-hour flight, or I wish I was listening to anything. And thank God I got podcasts, because at least they download to my device. So, that's good. But at the same time, I mean, if we live in a world where we're relying on streaming, we've given up is basically what we've done. We've given up all of the things that we fought really hard for 5 or 10 years ago to try to get control of our media. We've just said, we'll give it up. We'll just get it off Netflix. That's kind of sad.
Yeah, and it's a win for everybody but consumers, because now the big corporations, they have the media, and the other big corporations have put data caps on you. So if you want to watch the media more than once, then you're going to go over your data cap. So, that's more money out of your pocket because you don't own the thing. You just want it on demand. So aren't people smart?
I'm just saying, I don't fit any of that mold you're talking about, because I have everything on a nice drive served up by a Plex server. And so if I'm streaming it, I'm streaming it from me. And, my entire music collection is on my phone. I don't mean streaming. I mean on my phone. It takes up less than 4 gigs of space, because music really super compresses. But I haven't bought a CD in years. I just, whatever crap is being produced right now, the few things I like to listen to, Spotify's good enough.
I don't even know where you buy CDs anymore. What, Barnes and Noble, are they still a thing? Tower Records went bust.
I assume you could buy them from Amazon, maybe. But like
I
when I do buy music, like if I buy something from Amazon or from iTunes or something like that, it's been, again, years since I did. I immediately burn it to a CD and then rip that CD to an MP3 so that I own that file. That's just, I still have a little bit of that neckbeard in me that makes me want to own the file.
Yeah, no, the more we talk about this, the more I realize that the whole concept of a NAS is very empowering, but you have to realize and recognize why it's empowering to have one. I was just thinking, because I just finished doing a whole bunch of taxes with my accountant this week. And I use QuickBooks. When you run QuickBooks, you can buy the online version or the desktop version. Well, I still like the desktop version because it's just what I've been using for decades, and it's what I know, and it's still richer in functionality than their online version. But they want to sell the online version, and they'll do everything to try and shut me down from having my local desktop version. But then I'm relying on them. I'm relying on their control of my data. And if I give that fight up, they win somehow, I guess, or I lose somehow. And I don't know. I just don't want to give up that fight. So if I have
to win, because then your purchase becomes a subscription. Your one-time purchase becomes a monthly subscription. So they win because they stick you for more money.
Yeah, I guess you're right. And I guess I can't go anywhere, right? I mean, they got my data. I can't go and buy product X that's their next competitor. But I don't know. To me, I just want to own it. I just want to have my stuff.
But what's interesting, though, Miles, you did a little anecdote about doing your taxes. You needed the thing. You pulled it up off your NAS on your phone. More and more, the only reason you would want to keep your stuff on a NAS in your home is so that you could stream it when you're not in your home. Those streaming is such a part of the culture that even if you own it, you still have to give yourself access to it outside of your network.
Well, that's true. That's true. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's an important thing. I mean, in this particular case, though, I could put all of the files I need and pop it on a thumb drive and drive over to my accountant and give it to him, and I guess that's security. But yeah, I could definitely also just stream it.
And with products like OwnCloud and Plex, there's lots of things out there that let you do that very thing. Take your stuff and make it available wherever you are. And some of it's free, some of it is requires a payment. And personally, I'm a fan of payments because that encourages the people to stick around. My Plex, for my kids will go to Plex again because we have a large collection and because it's well done. They'll go to Plex first and then Netflix later. And so I am running my own Netflix out of my house. It's on my kids' devices, on my devices, and we can watch our whole library from anywhere. I paid, I think it was $25 lifetime fee for that. Maybe it's $100. It was dirt cheap back when I got in. But now there's a monthly fee or a lifetime fee that you pay to have that available, to make it that easy. There are other ways I could do that. I could make the stuff all available, but Plex is so easy. It's worth it to me to pay for their server space, and all they're doing is just hosting the connection between my device locally and my device remotely. And so there's always going to need to be that intermediary, and that's where the money is to be made, or where the challenge is developed, because those can be tricky to build and build well. Anybody can kludge an FTP, but only the geeks really know how to make that work. So you need, I think that's the future right there is while streaming is going to be the thing for a while, eventually things like data caps are going to win, and we're going to have to start owning our stuff. And then the middleware, the new middleware will be giving you access to your own stuff.
Well, my hope is on probably on an upcoming show that we can do some work on some of the newer distributed file protocols out there where everybody participates as one big part of a huge data storage for everyone to use, like IPFS, which I've been lucky enough to spend a lot of time with of late. So I should be able to bring some personal experience to the table on that one too.
All right. Cool. I think we have thoroughly and soundly beaten that horse. And once again, Seth, we made sure that all these great news stories you had, we didn't have time to talk about. We're going to have a
I appreciate the
Newsapalooza.
consistency.
We're going to have a Newsapalooza probably next week. Why not? Let's just do that. It's is that the
All
last
right.
week of the month? Yes, it is. So we'll just all the stuff we skipped for the last 3 episodes, we'll let you do. Yay.
That's okay. I mean, we'll see what comes up. Usually whenever we do those, there's a lot of good stuff that comes up that week.
That's true.
So,
yeah. All right, we'll see what happens. But for now, tell me what happened this week in history.
all right, Mark, on This Week in History, September the 20th, 1983, the RSA algorithm patent is awarded. The RSA algorithm, one of the world's most widely used encryption methods, had been developed in 1977. Scientific American columnist Martin Gardner wrote a description of the algorithm in his Mathematical Games column, mentioning that readers could send a self-addressed stamped envelope to receive a copy of the MIT technical memorandum describing it. More than 3,000 people sent envelopes, though they did not receive their copies of the papers until after the patent was issued 6 years later, due to members of the National Security Agency holding it till they broke it. Raising questions about the legality of making the information available. And that happened this week in history.
So that was back during the time when the government was actively trying to prevent you from having good encryption. They still don't want it, and they still want to break it, but they have stopped, at least temporarily, actively preventing you from having it. There was a time when you couldn't have encryption greater than, I think it was 48 bits, and they said if you're going to export it outside the country, you can't have one greater than that, which meant that anybody who ever wanted their software to be used by their Canadian neighbors to the north couldn't use it. So essentially, they just crippled encryption for about a decade there. And so this was in that time period where the NSA was saying, if we let people encrypt stuff, we won't be able to read it. And the RSA guys went, yeah, it's kind of the point.
Yeah, and all of this ties in with one of the news stories. It was an older one where the CIA WikiLeaks published that they have been hacking into D-Link, Belkin, and other routers for years, being able to see what's on your home network. So it's a good thing that we have telling people how to set up the NASs so that way the government can keep track of us. And when our NAS goes down, we can do a Freedom of Information Act to get them to
read
send
our own
us
stuff.
our backup. So I think that would work out really well. And that's the government using resources rightly.
Sometimes it just makes you sigh. That's all you can do.
Yeah.
So this is the part of the show where I ask you what you think. Go to elementop.com, click the Contact Us button at the top of the page, fill out the world's hardest CAPTCHA, and then fill out the form on the page there. That will send a message directly to my in-basket that gets priority there. You will go above all the other spam that I get. Or if you don't want to filter through me and you want to freedom, power to the people, you can email GeekRant@elementop.com. That goes to all 3 of us, and therefore I will not be able to censor the mail to the other 2 guys. Or you can dial 559-I-AM-OPI, leave a message on our Google Voice line, and we'll probably play it on the show because, let's face it, we don't have a lot of other choices. So let us know what you think. Element OP, for those of you that say I say it too fast. Element as in periodic table of elements, OP as in OP Taylor, or more recently, OP from Sons of Anarchy. And click on the contact and let us know what you think. Now, Seth, what do you have to lower my productivity when I'm not clicking drops to make you look like a better hiring option?
You didn't seem to like my alchemy link last week, so I've chosen something different this week where you have to click the color. So you go up here and it goes to this website, and there is the name is yellow, but the color that's written is red. So you have to click red and not yellow underneath in a certain amount of time. And every time it's shorter and shorter. So it's kind of like, are you color stimulated or are you word stimulated to know if this is hard? And for me, it's very hard because I see the word, but I have to stop because wait a minute. I see what the word says, but that makes it harder for me to identify the color. And so by the time I work all that out, can I find the color in the chart and click it before time's up?
That messes with your head, doesn't it?
It's a neat kind of a neat game. I did finally complete a level, so I was happy about that.
Wow.
That is a well-known psychology experiment, and surprisingly, not surprisingly, it works really well on people who can't read. But it's it's the two parts of your brain. We're programmed to process symbology more than colors. I guess it may be if we had a language coded in colors, the symbology wouldn't mean as much to us. But yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard.
If it was like written in Chinese or some language I can't read, it would probably be much easier.
Right. Yeah. So, but it's really hard to look at the word pink colored black and having to click on black and not pink.
Right.
There's some real cognitive dissonance going on there. Good stuff.
It took me like 7 or 8 times before I even understood what was going on.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a minute. It says yellow. I'm clicking on yellow. And then I tried to click the dots on the side of the screen. I couldn't figure out what was going on for a while. And I went, oh, that's what it's doing.
Yeah, when I first saw it, it said click the color, not the word. And then I'm looking at all the colors, and they're all white. It says pink, blue, black, but they're all white. And then I realized, oh, there's that big word up above it. That, moron. Yeah.
Guilty, I did the same thing.
I think that's right brain, left brain, all over the place. All right, that's it. Thanks, folks, for hanging out with us. This was a relatively dry show about a relatively dry topic, but one that is important. And by the way, if you have a NAS in your basement, it's important that you keep it dry, too. Just saying. So we'll see you next week. Remember, pay for what you like, people. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. And
there we go.
bye, YouTube people. Mwah. Love and kisses.